Well, good afternoon. So first, a bit of introduction. My name's Sean Devine. I'm from Kansas in the U.S. I'm not originally from Kansas. I'm originally from New York, but that sounds much less exotic when you're in Europe to say that. So I'm from the place you've only heard about in a few Wizard of Oz movies. First, before I get into the meat of the talk, let me introduce myself. So I'm the founder and CEO of a company called XBE. I'll mention a little bit more about what we do, but the short version is we make an operations management software platform for the horizontal construction industry. So companies that build roads use us to manage building roads. I started the company in 2016. We've always been on Ember, and I've been an active Ember developer the whole way. So a bit about me personally. So I'm married. That's the presentation's about artificial intelligence topics. So I had to make a couple of AI-based portraits of my wife, oldest daughter, and then some other things along the way. But anyways, I'm married to Teresa. I've got 5 kids. 3 of them are in these pictures. Kayla's the oldest over on the right. She works for XBE, and then I've got twins that are 8. They're in the middle with me. I've got 2 boys in the middle, one that's 21 and one that's 16. So a big, huge age range. Some of you have met Milind Alvarez before. He's looking quite suave in this picture. When I started XBE, the second person that I talked to after my wife was Milind and said, hey, do you want to do this together? He's based in Goa, India, and has been my partner all along the way. At this point, we have about 60% of our team in India and about 60% of them in Goa. So I was just in India last week and was there for a retreat that we held during the monsoon. If you've never been to Goa, India, this is not the time you'd expect one would go because it rains pretty much nonstop. But it turned out to be a great time to have everyone come together in one place. Milind was in Copenhagen and originally planned to be here giving this presentation with me, but some travel restrictions stopped that. So anyways, just wanted to thank him for being part of the inspiration for this and his collaboration on XBE. And that's his wife, Sinatra, on the left that also works for the company. This presentation is about AI, it's about art. And it's not the only time in the last month that I've used work as an excuse to do artistic things. And so here is most of the group that was at the monsoon retreat with the paintings that they made during kind of a breakout session just to get our creative juices flowing. And anyways, one of the fun things that you can do in India, because there are a lot more people and things don't cost quite the same that they do in the US, is we had a film crew for the entire meeting. And so they produced videos of everything, and we have like wedding photograph quality shots of basically every moment, which is fun to have for a presentation like this. Okay, so I usually wear a hard hat during presentations. Just not today. So anyways, this is me back 2 months ago at the National Asphalt Pavement Association's annual meeting, and I was the keynote speaker talking about use of artificial intelligence in construction. And part of what I'm going to show today was built in support of that presentation and is related to some work that we've done with NAPA, that's the way that they describe themselves, NAPA to provide AI tools for that industry. This green suit was purchased specifically for that speech. This outfit, however, was just what I had in my bag. So let's get to the meat of it. Eventually, we're going to show off some AI techniques, and what I want everyone to focus on is the I, the intelligence. The artificial part is really not the point. I'm very interested in what would be possible if I was way smarter, if we were way smarter. Ed's point this morning I thought was exactly on the nose on this with regards to, what was it called, God's number? Right, so if we were smarter, we could just do so many things beyond what we can currently do. And so I've become somewhat obsessed with AI because I see it as a path to, in my work lifetime, being as smart as I've hoped that I would be, and then having teams that are the same. And so my focus is, again, completely on the intelligence side, not so much on the artificial, because everything we're going to talk about is sort of joining human intelligence with whatever augmentation we can figure out. Let's see. Before I get to that, so the presentation itself is a little bit unusual in its structure, and so here's why I'm doing it this way. My goal first was to advocate for the construction of intelligent applications. We've done a lot of that at XB, have had, I think, much more success than even I had hoped back at the beginning of the year, and yet I see not as many similar features and applications being built by others, and so I'd like to show some things off. But in order to do that, it's really helpful to have a demonstration of the techniques that I'm talking about to look at. And so I built an app called Aittendee that we're going to see in action during this presentation. But in order to see it in action, I had to come up with something to talk about. Because if I just talked about AI with the AI tool, I thought it'd be a little bit much. And so I combined my interest in art and my previous trips to Madrid into a short talk about the Garden of Earthly Delights by Hieronymus Bosch. And I'll talk about that in a minute. And the purpose of that 10 to 15 minutes is, one, to entertain and educate a little bit, but also to provide the content that we'll then use to show off how the Aittendee app works. For what it's worth, I can't believe that I'm the fourth speaker today and the first person to say the words artificial intelligence or AI. I would have bet against that by quite a bit, but here we are. I'm going to just quickly start something in the background here, and we will get back to that shortly. Who has seen this painting in person? Oh, great. So that's not that many people. That was only about 15% of the audience. So this is the Garden of Earthly Delights, and it's by a Dutch painter named Hieronymus Bosch. It was painted around 1500, which is somewhat incredible, and we're going to go into the details in just a minute, but I want to mention why I picked this painting as the one to talk about. So I have been to Madrid once before, and it was 28 years ago, which is hard to believe. But I think it was 1995. I don't have any pictures of the trip myself. There weren't camera phones at the time. I reached out to my mother to see if she had any photos at her house, but she's actually traveling in Paris right now. And so we've got to go with my recollection, which was 1995. It was a high school trip to Madrid. And during that trip, we went to the Prado. And I remember vividly this painting from that trip, which is funny, just because once you sort of look at the details of the painting, I can imagine why 16-year-old me was interested in it. But anyhow, and when I thought back to that trip and my reaction to that painting, it reminded me of a few years ago when Ender's Game, the movie, came out, and there was some buzz about that book. And I remembered reading Ender's Game when I was a teenager and loving it. And someone asked, "Do you think you'd like it now?" And I said, "Oh, no, I don't know." So I reread it, and I really didn't like it as an adult, and it made me completely rethink my opinions from my childhood. But anyways, I had the same sort of thought about this painting, which is, boy, it really left an impression when I was a teenager. Let's go revisit it. And so yesterday, I very jet-lagged me, went to the Prado and walked right in the front door and straight to this painting to see what it was like 28 years later. And so what I'm going to do is tell you a bit about it, tell you some impressions of mine that I had then and now about that, and maybe use that as a way to think about how we can use art to open our minds to new ideas. All right. I'm going to blame, by the way, my jet lag for having these notes in front of me. I wasn't super confident I'd remember every detail without, so you've got a deal. Okay, so this is the Garden of Earthly Delights. It's a triptych. It's actually about this size in person, which is quite striking when you see it. There's a rope set back, I don't know, about 4.5, 5 feet, and it's lit quite nicely, but just imagine a painting. Maybe it's slightly smaller than this, but very, very big triptych. As I said, it was painted in 1500 by Hieronymus Bosch. Now, one of my favorite things about that is that there isn't too much that's known about him. And part of me is like, geez, I wish we knew all the details of his life. But I think much of the fascination about this painting and about him is that we don't know a ton about him. And so we get to have more of a dialogue with the painting to say, well, what do we think it meant then? And what does it mean now? So just to give kind of a quick overview, on the left side is sort of a typical Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve story. There are many atypical parts that are coming, but that's the typical part. In the middle, these are the earthly delights, and I'll point out some of the specifics shortly, but you'll see them. And then over to the right is more of like the hell scene. So that's again, not explained really, but the consequences of something. So a typical triptych in some ways, but very atypical in others. Now, before I get into that, let's just go over quickly kind of what was going on around 1500. So this was kind of between the medieval and early Renaissance period, and I think a very pivotal sort of time, and I think you'll probably think so too when you hear about what was going on. So the printing press had just been invented, maybe about 50 years before this painting, but approximately in his lifetime, so right about the same time. Constantinople fell right after the printing press and a little bit before that, or before this painting. That's important because when Constantinople fell, all of the writings from that empire were made available to Western Europe. And it's interesting, there's so much talk now in the AI world about finding new tokens. This was sort of like the ultimate find new tokens from 1458 or whatever, when all of those texts became available. So anyways, that happened right about the same time. Obviously, the quote discovery of America happened about the same time. So much was going on. And kind of you add all of that up, and we were in a period of transition from most art and most art being religious to some art being more humanist and focused on sort of individuals and their experience in the world. And I think this painting represents that moment pretty perfectly, right? It's a religious scene, I think, in many ways. But when we look at the details, it's obviously not exactly what one would have expected if they were in the medieval period. So that's a bit about the background. Let's talk about the painting in a little bit more detail. So on the left side, we've got the Adam and Eve sort of moment with God. So, God presenting Adam to Eve, a bunch of strange things going on. One, the footsie being played between Adam and God is really odd and not really understood. I mean, most of the painting's not really understood. If you look up, you'll see animals that at first glance look like things from the real world. Like that kind of looks like a giraffe, but it doesn't really look like a giraffe. It's changed. So I did a bit of research to say, like, okay, would someone of Bosch's station would they have known what a giraffe looked like? And the answer is yes. So because of the sort of early Renaissance information spread that was going on, if you were educated, you had a pretty good idea of what sort of exotic animals were like. And so that's deliberate. We've got a unicorn, obviously, that's deliberate. If you look at every one of the animals, they're odd. You've got this sort of sculpture fountain sort of thing going on that in some ways looks man-made because it's not natural, but it's also a little bit too organic to be man-made, and so there's that. You've got sort of this spectacular rock structure in the top left with flocks of birds flying in and out of it. You can look at every square, 4 inches of this and find something else strange. And that's just on this one. Now you go to the middle. You don't have to go square 4 inches to find something strange in the middle. There are things that are strange everywhere. Now, there's a repeat of the sort of fantastical creatures, the giant birds, the birds that are crossed with other creatures. Obviously, you've got a lot of people in the middle, none of them wearing anything, sort of engaged in strange activities. There are a number of these orbs, sort of these big, almost like large fruit orbs that people are engaged with in different ways. See like a giant grape or some sort of giant fruit there. Again, we don't have time to go through every detail, but I encourage you to look up this painting. In fact, if you download the sort of full scan from the Prado, it's something like 32,000 pixels wide, and it still doesn't capture nearly the detail you'd need in order to sort of fully get the work. But anyways, many, many, many interesting things going on here. Basically, people enjoying themselves in every way you could imagine in a setting that doesn't feel like one that's real. Over here, things turn very, very dark. Up at the top, and it's a little bit hard to see in this setting, but there kind of is like a set of structures, almost like a castle, with fire and destruction and a big march of figures. We don't really know what they're about. In the middle, we see a whole bunch of strange things from, this large face that's staring back at us. We don't know if that's the artist himself or what, really. This is the only panel where we see man-made looking contraptions that are sort of part musical instrument, part torture device. Again, it's quite odd. We've got these sort of disembodied ears with the large knife. Again, you look at the details and it's clear that he's saying something, and it's likely a morality tale of some sort related to sort of, the sort of Genesis and then, sin of some sort. But it's also not super clear what his point was. So that's kind of a quick overview. Now, as I mentioned, we're not exactly sure what his point was, but there have been a number of guesses, and I think many of them make sense. Some people think that he just was experimenting with creativity, sort of seeing, how far he could push himself in terms of coming up with new ideas in this sort of newly free world. Maybe that's right. Many of his other paintings are religious, especially when he was a little bit younger, and so maybe it was just sort of a natural progression of more fantastical religious paintings. That could have been it. There's some obvious social commentary cues in this painting, so maybe it was mostly social commentary. It's kind of dreamlike, and so perhaps it was him just sort of manifesting his dreams physically, sort of showing off his artistic talents and his ability to sort of conjure into a painting just about anything. So maybe it was that. It could have just been a patron's request. This is my favorite guess, that someone just paid him a bunch of money to do it, which, wouldn't be the first time. So maybe it's that. Again, maybe it has to do with sort of exploring the power of humanity and the oddness of humanity and how it's going to transcend some of the sort of religious messages that would have been common back then. So the point is, we're not actually really sure. But I know that in the entire Prado, this painting had the biggest crowd around it. And maybe it's because it's the most famous, but I actually think it's just magnetic. I mean, you walk in, there's this practically glowing painting that even, all of these years later in 2023 still sort of provokes an immediate reaction from anyone that sees it and, causes interesting questions. On that point, and to wrap this up, it was so interesting to be there standing in front of it yesterday when a teenage girl, she was about 16, raised her hand and said to the tour guide, hey, do you think that there's something to the fact that there aren't any man-made tools at all on the left two panels? And then she had a whole series of thoughts about the significance of the man-made structures on the right and what it may be saying. And right then, the tour guide, who was pretty grizzled, right? She had given this tour about 1,000 times, I bet, stepped back and said, you know what? You may be right. I had never thought of that. And for me, it was sort of an inspiration to say, you know what? Art is a dialogue or art can be a dialogue at least between the piece and you, and that even if someone's looked at it many, many times over the years, context change and people are different. And, that young woman had, I think, a pretty interesting observation that was heartfelt and shared it and caused the tour guide to sort of see things in a new way, which was really interesting. So that is the Garden of Earthly Delights in the most abbreviated form. It's right in the Prado, right as you walk in, kind of the main gallery area. And I recommend, if you've got any time, to go see it. Okay. If I did this right, now, we will demonstrate an app that I made called Aittendee that can attend a presentation and do a number of interesting things. So let's just take a tour through. So first, you can see on the left side, a live summary was written of the talk that I just gave. Now, none of this was done in advance. So 100% of the content we're going to look at of every sort was generated on the fly in the background based on all the words I just said right now. So on the left side, and it's probably still catching up a little bit, on the left side we've got an overview that will go through kind of in summary form an overview of what I talked about. Now, I'm not going to read it out loud, but you can see that it's got a bit of an intro, then some context, information about the symbolism and interpretation, and then some bits about artistic detail, and then modern day impressions on the left side, and then a little bit more about what I said about embracing art or interpreting art. Kind of incredible. And I'd encourage you to read the details, but I think a well-done summary of the bits that I just said. If we look to the right, we'll see this are pull quotes that are the most interesting things, if there were many, that I said during that talk. So one of my favorite things is that there isn't too much known about the artist, making this painting and him a bit of a mystery. Well, I'd agree. That's probably one of the things that I would have pulled. There's a rope set back, and it's lit quite nicely, enhancing the viewing experience of this large triptych. The left side follows a typical Adam and Eve story, but there are many atypical parts coming. So, again, I think those are things that I exactly said, but it's pulling the most sort of notable short sound bites and highlighting them. Now, below, you can see that it's rotating through terms that were mentioned that it thinks the audience may not know, and then defining them. So we've got Renaissance. I didn't describe that much, but here we go. Quick definition of that. Tokens. That's cool. Footsie. Unbelievable. What I like about that is that it thought that programmers wouldn't know what footsie meant, which is maybe on the nose, but contractions. I'm not sure that I said that, but there we go. So we've got torture device. These are all of the vocabulary words that it decided may be helpful to define for the audience, and then with the definition. Now, if we go to the right, we've got some art about art, which I thought was fun. A couple things. So this one is a little piece called Dialogue of Divinity. says the content suggests a juxtaposition of two scenes, a tranquil Eden and a chaotic hell, etc. Transition tumult. And you see kind of an artist's statement of what inspired my AI illustrator here to create. Transition epoch. All kind of quite interesting and tie it again to the content that I was presenting. Now, if we look in the middle here, we've got a couple of questions from the audience. Now, let's see who this is. This is Queen Isabella I of Castile. Now, she was the Queen of Spain at the time, and I figured given the location it'd be fun to have her attend this speech. And so I said, well, let's come up with questions based on her life and sensibilities that would be, would be interesting.
As Isabella I of Castile, who significantly valued education and the expansion of knowledge, I'm intrigued by the speaker's connection between programming and the appreciation of Hieronymus Bosch's triptych painting. Can you perhaps delve into how this work of art, with its intricate detail and layers of meaning, can inspire coders to consider the scope and design of their projects in a more holistic, interconnected view, akin to the concept of the triptych format?
Wow, that was an incredibly good question from Isabella. So there's that. And I also, if you didn't know, Leonardo da Vinci was also alive at the same time as Bosch at 1500. Let's see what he had, question he had.
Leonardo da Vinci here. As someone deeply invested in visual depictions of reality, I've always been fascinated by the capacity of art to present complexities of our world, something we can see in the Garden of Earthly Delights. What fascinates me is how a singular painting, like a piece of complex coding, can encapsulate so many layers of interpretation. Given your experience, how do you see the cognitive process of interpreting complex works of art correlating to debugging and unraveling intricate code in programming, particularly in Ember? Would you say there's an argument to be made for incorporating more artistic studies into coding education and training?
Another very smart attendee. Anyways, we don't have time to answer, but thanks to Leonardo and Isabella. Okay, so those are the attendee questions. Now, just a couple last things. If we look at the top, I'm one to speak for too long, so first things first, I put a pace meter, so it would tell the audience and me how quickly I'm speaking, 152 words a minute for the whole thing. Went 14.4 minutes, that's what I was going for, so good on that. Now, in case you're wondering, what does it cost in order to do all of this work? Now, we had a live summary like an Axios writer. We have an illustrator that created, I don't know, maybe 8 or so custom illustrations. We have those attendees. We've got our marketer pulling the pull quotes. Look at that one. It's kind of dreamlike, and so perhaps it was him just sort of manifesting his dreams physically, sort of showing off his artistic talents and his ability to conjure into a painting just about anything. It's good. And then, we've got the definitions, we've got the questions and the rest. So the exact amount that this cost was $4.72 to do all those things. So $20 an hour. Every single call that I made, I recorded what the cost was and just aggregated that up. Now, interestingly, sometimes I think it's important to have a third party sort of vet the tone of your talk. And so here's what I made. I made a metric that is the polarity, well, 2 metrics, one that's polarity and one that's subjectivity. And so as the talk is going, every single bit, and I'll talk about how I did it in a second, it's measuring how positive or negative the content is, and how subjective it is, right? How factual or opinion-centric it is. And then created a metric that then would go up and down over time, and there we go. So that's Aittendee. I made it just for this. So these are all tools that are available to us right now. And I think it's about as good of a use of Ember in some ways as I could imagine, right? And that instead of it just being, kind of waiting for a person to type a thing in and submit a form, I just hooked up to the audio, right? All of this was just because my laptop was listening. and then all the rest is going on, sort of reacting to that audio in real time, sort of leveraging, a lot of the best bits of Ember's architecture. So let's go through that for just a few minutes. So here's how this all worked. And the code is available on GitHub. You can just look at the details. I think that a number of them are pretty worthwhile to review if you're ever going to try to do any part of this. But what was going on is that live, it was chunking the audio into, I think, 12-second bits, if I remember right, and then transcribing those using the Whisper model from OpenAI, and then emitting an event every time it had a transcript of a new chunk. Okay, so once that happened, then a bunch of other things kick off. So one, the content that then the transcripts are summarized into chapters and sort of reduced into just the bullet points of what the main content was that was said. And that makes it easier to sort of repurpose it into other uses. So transcription happens, it spits out events, then a summarization process happens to sort of reduce into these bulleted chapter summaries. And then that's evented, and the chapters then, when they are created, kick off a bunch of other work. So first, it looks through the transcript of every chapter and scores, well, first it sort of grabs the unique words that hadn't been defined before and or hadn't been defined. Then it takes those and it scores them for newness to the audience, value to the audience, and how likely it is that it could define it accurately. And so only the words that are new, have value, new to the audience, have value, and that it is confident it can define, will it then define and stick into the queue that are rotating through. Pull quotes are the same way, are done the same way. So it takes the transcript that is being generated into chapters. It then sends each of those and asks it to ask GPT-4 in this case to suggest quotes that may be notable, along with a rewritten form to make sure they sort of fit into a short amount of space, and score them in terms of their marketing interest. So that's happening live. Each attendee, so Leonardo da Vinci and Queen Isabella, every one of them are watching the events for the chapter summaries as they come out, and then responding to those with questions from their sort of point of view. We had 2, you could have any number. So that's what was happening there. Then I used Google's text to audio with a voice that made sense for the kind of attendee to generate that audio to make it sound nice and human. For the illustrations, I chose a style that I wanted the illustrator to have. And then there's an art director model that is reading the summaries and then generating art direction for the illustrator to follow. And then the illustrator takes the art direction, applies their style, generates the image, and then comes up with a name for, or rather the art director comes up with the name and then sort of overlaid it on top. I used DALL-E for that, and then title and placement were calculated after that. And then for pace monitoring and sentiment monitoring, those are, pace monitoring is pretty straightforward, right? I'm just counting up the words from the transcript and dividing the time. And then sentiment monitoring is every chapter had its polarity and subjectivity graded on a -1 to 1 on polarity, and then subjectivity on a 0 to 1, and then aggregated up over time to come up with those individual numbers. And then finally, the cost monitoring. Every API call had a function that could calculate based on its parameters what its cost was, and so I was doing that and aggregating up those costs to show the final number. Now, as I mentioned, all of that is in one Ember app called Aittendee. I've put it on GitHub. It's not really meant as anything but this sort of, for this sort of purpose, is just to sort of show off all that's possible right now using these techniques and these APIs, but I think is a pretty good how-to for all sorts of practical application of AI purposes. And so it's up there, and you'll need API tokens in order to use it, but it should be helpful. So that's the Garden of Earthly Delights, and that's Aittendee. Again, whether that's practically helpful or not, I think it's a good demonstration of what's possible now. And I hope you enjoyed that and that you give some of it a shot.